Hi guys, it's Miss Russell here, and we're going to recap on some of our learning on world geography. I'm dressed like this because we are heading towards the Arctic Circle, and we're going to spend some time in Sweden there. We might pop over and have a look at Greenland for a little moment, but predominantly focusing on Sweden. But before we head there, let's recap on what we've learnt so far. So there's 7 main continents in the world. Those are North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, are sometimes referred to as Australasia or Oceania, but generally called Australia and does include New Zealand. And then we have Antarctica. This is our world map with our lines of latitude and longitude. So we're focusing on the lines of latitude, which are the ones that go horizontal across the map. And a good way to remember that is latitude, flatitude, the flat lines across there. And of course, the most famous one is the equator, which is at 0 degrees. So it's the dividing line of latitude. It divides the northern hemisphere from the southern hemisphere. The hottest place on earth, particularly in places like Africa and Ethiopia over here, experiences droughts all the time. Madagascar, which is this island here, is experiencing terrible droughts at the moment. So all these areas are very, very super hot. Now, the next line that we're going to look at is the line that's 23.5 degrees approximately, and I've rounded that off north, and that is the Tropic of Cancer. Now, because we're on a sphere or globe, we're going to look at the mirror of that in the south and 23.5 degrees, and we have the Tropic of Capricorn. Now, the way to remember which one is which is Cancer has an N in it, so N is for north. That's the way that I remember. I just know Cancer is in the north because it has an N in it, so that's a good way to remember. Now, what's really interesting is anywhere between the equator and these lines, these tropic lines, you only have 2 seasons, and those are the wet and the dry season. So the wet and dry seasons occur between the tropic lines and the equator. In India, which is over here, they experience the monsoon, and that is their wet season. So during the wet season, there's lots of tropical storms and an enormous amount of water. And of course, we can understand what dry is. However, some areas are experiencing more dry and some are experiencing more wet due to climate change. All right, heading north, and we're going to 66.5 degrees north, and that is the Arctic Circle. And south, mirroring, we have the Antarctic Circle at 66.5 degrees south. Now, if we've got 2 seasons between these lines of the tropics, we have 4 seasons from the line of the tropics to the circle lines, and that's both north and south. So you know that New Zealand experiences 4 seasons. The United States over here experiences 4 seasons, as so does predominantly Europe and Asia experience 4 seasons. However, the closer they get to the Arctic Circle or the Antarctic Circle, the longer the days and the longer the nights, depending on the season. So if it's summer, you're going to have very, very long days in around these areas here. And if it's winter, you are going to have very, very long, dark nights, if you were going to call it that. It means that in the Arctic Circle, when it's their summer, they've got days pretty much 24 hours, 23, 22 hours of daylight. And then, of course, in the opposite in winter. So we're heading off to one of our countries, and that is in Northern Europe. So that's this area here. And we're looking at Sweden. So Sweden is commonly known as a Nordic country. Bordering it is Norway and Finland, and across the water is Denmark. This is their flag. And of course, it's an easy flag to remember with a gold cross and a contrasting blue background. The capital of Sweden is Stockholm, and that's at the bottom of Sweden, or on this little knob here, and it's very close to the rest of Europe. So that experiences the four seasons. However, up here in the top in the north, that's on the Arctic Circle. So they're really experiencing a whole different type of climate, and we'll look at that in a minute. The total population of Sweden is 10.6 million. That's just over double the size of New Zealand. And then they have a land area of 450,000 square metres, and that's just under double the size of New Zealand. So when we look at the population density, that's how many people per square kilometre, we have approximately the same. All right, so let's go right back to the indigenous people of Sweden, and they were originally Vikings. And so all the Nordic countries were Vikings. They were a warrior culture, they were great explorers and known for their seafaring skills, and that's how they conquered many lands. They lived in villages made out of the resources around them. And so here you see a lot of wood, and then we have their roofs made of sook. So sook is a combination of mud and grasses, and they put this on their roofs and around the outside of their houses, both to keep the houses together in the different weather elements, but also to help with insulation. And we know that a lot of people are now using same techniques today, because it is more sustainable and better for our climate. And so there culturally, the Vikings used to adore many gods, and so they were a polytheistic culture. That means that they had many gods that they looked to. And of course, the most famous was Thor, and this is the more contemporary version of Thor with Chris Hemsworth. And that all changed. The Viking culture really came to an end around 1066 CE, or 1066 Common Era. The Common Era is a term we use. We no longer use AD, which means after Christ, because we like to incorporate all cultures when discussing history. So CE is the Common era that we all agree that Christ was born in 0 CE, and we measure from there. So the Viking culture really came to an end because by that time the whole of Europe had adopted Christianity. And this is modern Sweden. This is Stockholm now. It's very beautiful. Do take the time to go and have a look at other images of Sweden. You can see the water there. The water is still a huge part of their culture. You can see Christianity is still part now of modern Sweden, with the church spires going up into their cityscape. And this is an image of rural Sweden with a little village, and you can see cows here. So yes, they do similar agriculture to us here in New Zealand. And here we have today's modern Swedes. They do not look like Vikings. In fact, they look like any other part of the modern world, and particularly the Western world. We have become what we call homogenized, in that we all are starting to look the same, particularly when it comes to clothing. Our cultures change slightly, and perhaps our etiquette, or our food, and little tiny things, of course, language. But the way we dress seems to be quite homogenized. That means it's all very much the same. One of the fun facts I found out about Sweden is that it has an ice hotel, and this has been operating for 30 years, and it's fully made of ice. And you can stay there in one of its rooms for 5,000 Swedish krona, which is about 850 New Zealand dollars per night. And honestly, I thought it was going to cost a lot more than that, but hey, um, that is a lot, but still not as much as what I thought it would be, because it's so cold. But anyway, that's a little bit of a fun fact. Another really wonderful fact about Sweden is, particularly in the northern area of Sweden, is they get to experience the aurora borealis, which is the northern lights. And they are absolutely wonderful. They are created by the flares and gases coming from the sun and reflecting into our atmosphere. And because they are close to the Arctic Circle or the North Pole, and there is the Southern Lights down in the Antarctica and the South Pole, they get these wonderful visual displays of magic. Go and have a look at lots of photos because they are stunning. And we've got some wildlife that exists there, and we have the lynx, which is beautiful cat, bit large to be domesticated, and thank goodness nothing looks better than it does in the wild. And they are truly stunning felines. And then we have a picture here of an albino moose. They have moose and which aren't albino as well, but I thought this was a really lovely photo. And of course, wolves, and I love wolves. So those are some areas that you might want to look and do some research in yourself. But there's a little bit more that I want to cover, and we're going to go over to the west a little bit, and we're going to go to Greenland. And these are indigenous people from Greenland. We could call them Inuit. We have done so in the past, but to be honest, that's probably not the correct description. They will have their own word to use for themselves. So you can see them here dressed in their seal skins, and they used every part of the seal. It was a massive animal for their survival as a culture. The skins were used in clothing, they were used in bedding, they were used in bags, they were used to build houses, and of course they used every little bit of that seal. So they sustainably managed sealing, and they also made sure they had no waste. And they were colonized by the Danish. And this is one of the first villages that were implemented when they were colonized. And this is how they looked. And the villages had different, or the houses had different colors, so that the Danes could understand what role that person had when they lived in that house. So a teacher might have a blue house, and a doctor might have of medicine, might have a yellow house, or a person that's good at building would have a red house, something like that. So those aren't the correct colours, but that's what I learned from an Indigenous person when I went to an Indigenous conference, and I found that very interesting. And of course, this is their mode of travel, and that's a safety thing as well as that's all that they had. They only used the resources that they had available, and it was made so that they didn't fall through the ice, and that they could travel with ease in the treacherous conditions that they had. So that's my quick little look at cultures on the Arctic Circle, and there's a whole lot more if you want to have a look or look into something in particular in depth. But what I want you to do is have a look at this video that I have down below, and it is a YouTuber called Yona Yinton, and who I like following. She's also a well-known blogger, and that's how she makes her money. So if you've ever thought that you want to make money off social media, this lady is one to follow. She does beautiful photography. She's a dancer, singer, and yeah, that's you can see that all through her videos. So she talks about the long days and the long nights that she experiences living in a northern village in Sweden. She has ice baths, she has to chop wood, it's all about survival. So have a look at that. It's a very beautiful video, and she's very interesting. I'm going to put a quiz down below to see if you remember anything I've rabbled on about. It's just a fun quiz, so give it a go and catch you guys later.